of the Fort Monroe Authority Board of Trustees and all the Fort Monroe Authority staff that have gathered under the tree in the back to stay in the shade. And we just wanted to spend just a moment and tell you that the significance of this property cannot go unstated. It's often been said that Fort Monroe may be the most significant site in our country for African Americans. That was a phrase that I adopted when I got here. The more that I've been here, the more that I have learned about this. Indeed, that is true. But it's also true, and it may even be more significant to say, this is one of the most significant sites in our country for all Americans. There's never been a better time in our country for us to begin to address some of the issues that have faced us for so long and for so long have gone ignored. You know, the Army had this property for a couple hundred years. The Army did a lot of the things that you see around here, but what the Army did not do was they did not tell you very much about the significance of this site. Not only from the fact that Captain John Smith landed here and he said he found great comfort at this point of property, came back in 1609 and built the first fortress, but what happened in 1619 is something that we just haven't as a country really talked about. In 1619, when that ship pulled up into this harbor and traded those 20 and odd Africans for supplies at Fort Monroe, was the first trade that occurred here at Point Comfort, you could say here in North America, as people as property. That is a tragic welcome to the African community that came here. Fast forward 242 years later, we've had the war between the states, the fortress here, we've had the War of 1812. We've had this fortress has then been built. Robert E. Lee was here. He knows how significant it is. And suddenly the country's in civil war, and there's this incredible division that's taken place in our country. And three men who were enslaved in Hampton, had been sent across the water to work on Confederate fortifications, heard that when they finished their work there, they were going to be sent south. They feared they would never see their families again. Those three men, in a sacrifice of bravery, in a challenge of courage that I can't imagine, got in a rowboat. It rowed across that treacherous harbor, arrived here at the fortress, hailed up to the wharf and asked to come ashore. They were welcomed ashore. They ran to the fortress. General Butler interviewed them somewhere on this property. Oh, if we could find out exactly where General Butler interviewed them on this property. General Butler interviewed them. Now, General Butler was also a lawyer. He's also a general. He wanted to know as much as he could about these three men. He wanted to know as much about what they were doing. He wanted to gather information from them. Quite satisfied that he'd gleaned all the information from them, he went to bed that night. The next day, under a white flag of truce, the Confederates show up, and they hear that the enslaved people are here at this fortress. General Butler himself goes out on the very streets that you can walk on today, here outside of this fortress. He engages them in a debate about this enslavement issue. These Confederate emissaries say, well, do you have our slaves? He said, yes, I do. What do you intend to do with them? He said, I intend to hold them. They sort of mocked him, I guess. This is a story as Adam Goodhart relates in his book, 1861. They said, you can't do that. Congress passed the Fugitive Slave Law Act. You have to return them to us. General Butler said, had no idea you still adhered to the Congressional Slave Act. I thought you'd seceded. Fine, I'll tell you what, if I'm wrong, if you'll salute the flag over the fortress, take off your hat, get off your horse, I'll be happy to give you your slaves back. They, of course, were aghast at any kind of offer like that. And then they got indignant. And they said, you have to give them back to us. They're our property. Like any good lawyer on a good Perry Mason show, waiting for the closing moment there, he realizes, I know y'all don't know who Perry Mason is, I'm sorry. He realizes that they have just stepped into his legal trap, and he says, so you call them your property, and yet you say you're using them against me in the war effort. Then I will declare them contraband of war, and I will not return them. With that, he very proudly rides back into the fortress, pretty confident of what he's done. The next night, 3 more showed up. The next night, 8 showed up. The next night, dozens showed up, until eventually hundreds and hundreds of people, not property, but people, were walking through the streets of Hampton, trying to find their way to that freedom's fortress. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a powerful moment in our history, that at the exact site in our country where the first people were traded as property is the exact site in our country where the first people were not returned as property. I was in Jamestown the other week, And they talked about a few miles down from here is where we think, and over there we think. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have to say a few miles from here. We don't have to say somewhere else. We can say at the exact piece of property where the first people were traded is the exact piece of property where they were not returned as property. There is an emancipation moment that resulted in a freedom movement that is still going on today. And ladies and gentlemen, that's why we need to have Fort Monroe restored. That's the work that you're going to be doing here as the Hope Crew. That's why this is so important. You think about this as you work on it. As you think about whether or not that nail's in there straight. Maybe we ought to just, we caulk that thing, nobody will see it. Think about it. Think about the fact that we want this to be done right. We want to tell this story right. We want to tell this history right. We want to make this the place where people will have the conversation that this country has not happened before. And ladies and gentlemen, it starts when we start renovating buildings like this behind us. So thank you for being here. I'm sorry for the heat. Please know there's plenty of water still over there. I hope that you'll continue to get water as we go through this. I think it is my turn now to introduce Larry Waldrop. Larry, welcome to the podium, and let's all give Larry a big round of applause.